Hey everyone, so in this video I wanted to talk about rent collection because over the last 2 weeks the whole of our portfolio has had just one person that hasn't paid their rent, and I wanted to try and go through the whole process with you on what we do when this happens. Now, it doesn't happen very often, so before we do that, what I want to do is just explain the whole process of how we collect rents in the first place, and then in part 2 we'll do the process and what we do if a tenant doesn't pay. So we like to try and keep things really easy in our portfolio. So we've got anything up to about 150 tenants at any one time. So if we're chasing rent on a daily basis and allowing tenants to pay whenever they want to, then it's going to be an absolute nightmare to know when we're up to date or whether we've got any rents to chase. So what we do is we take all of our rents on the first day of each month. Now, if it's a bank holiday, then of course it will go on to the next day. Now, I know that tenants don't always get paid on the first. Some people get paid in the middle of the month. Some people get paid at the end of the month. But really for us, if the tenant can pro-rata that rent, so if they get paid on the 25th, then they're going to have to wait until the 1st to pay us, and they're going to have to manage their money. Now, by doing that, it means that all of our rent should be in by the end of the day on the 1st of each month, which means we only have to really reconcile once. We might get a few stragglers that pay on the 2nd or the 3rd, but at least then it's all at the beginning of the month, and then the rest of the month we can focus on developing and growing our business. So how do we do this? Well, we don't use direct debits. Now, there's nothing wrong with direct debits, but the thing is, with the direct debit system, you have to pay per customer, and as you grow and as your portfolio gets bigger, then that's going to start costing you quite a lot of money. Now, the only benefit that I can see from having a direct debit system is that you get told if you're not going to get paid. And that's the only benefit that I can see. So what we tend to do is that when our tenants check in, we've got a standing order mandate. Now, standing orders are free. The mandate is for the tenant to complete in front of us when we check them in, and to sign at the bottom to give their bank the authority to send over to our bank account their rent on the 1st of each month. Now, then what we do is we take that mandate away and we post it to their bank. Now, we do that because we don't want the tenant to forget and then on rent day start having to chase them for their rents, etc. Now, the great thing is with standing orders is that they're free. And if we're not going to get paid, we're not going to get paid. There's no way around that, no matter what system you use. But it does mean that on the 1st of the month, by 9 a.m., the rent should have been paid. Now, sometimes it gets bounced because the tenant doesn't always have enough money, but usually speaking, by 9 a.m, we can come to the office and then we can check to see which tenants have paid and which ones haven't. Now, I use a system called Tenant, which is my system that I created. Check that out. That's gotenant.co.uk. And then we can link Tenant to a rent tracker that tells us whether the tenant has paid or not. So that's the system that we use. Now, it's really simple and it's really, really easy. Now, what we tend to do, if tenants don't pay, by lunchtime on the 1st, by the system that we use, the standing order, then all of the tenants should have paid. Now, if you've got any outstanding tenants that haven't paid, what we'll do is we'll just send them a nice polite text message to say, it's rent day today. Don't forget, please make sure you pay it by the end of the day. And normally that does the trick and most of the rents are in. But this month, we've had just one tenant that hasn't paid, and they still haven't paid, and we're over 2 weeks in now. So this is the system that we'll use if the tenant doesn't pay. On the 1st of the month by 6 p.m, if the rent hasn't landed, then the tenant will get a text message from the property manager saying, we haven't received your rent yet. Please can you make sure that you transfer this over today? Then we'll wait until the 2nd. And then on the 2nd of the month, if the rent still hasn't come in, then they'll get a phone call from the office just to ask them why their rent hasn't arrived yet. Now, normally speaking, it's just an oversight on the tenant's behalf, and they will put the rent in as soon as possible. Now, the problem lies is where the tenant doesn't respond to us and they just completely ignore all of our communication. So what we'll do is we'll call, if we don't have the rent in, again, we'll call them again the next day. And if we still haven't got the rent in, we'll be sending them a rent reminder letter on day 3. So if they're 3 days into not paying, they'll be having a rent reminder letter. And on the letter, it will just be a nice soft reminder to say, this might be an oversight on your behalf. Please, can you make sure you pay as soon as possible? Now, if we still haven't had the rent in by day 5, then we need to establish whether or not the tenant is still living at the property. Now, this is really critical that we do move quite quickly, because if the tenant has moved out, then we need to advertise that room really fast so we don't miss another month's rent. So that's why we need to act really quickly on this. So if the tenant hasn't communicated with us, we don't know why they haven't paid, what we're going to do is write to them and tell them that we're going to come and inspect their room. So we're going to give them 24 hours notice to inspect their room to see if they're still there. And we'll hand deliver that letter. So then what will happen is we'll go and we'll view the property and we'll inspect their room. If they're not there and it's very obvious that they've left their key, there are no possessions at all, then we can go down the route of abandonment and take the room back, only if we're clear. If it's not clear that they've left, or it looks like they're still in possession of the room and they've got their belongings there still, then we'll leave them a final demand letter to explain that their rent needs to be brought up to date as soon as possible. If the tenant is there, then it's a great opportunity for us to communicate and to find out what's happened and what's gone wrong. So if they're not there and we leave them a letter and we still don't have any rent, then we will need to go down the route of whether or not we're looking to seek possession. Now, they may have just abandoned the room and left. We don't know that though, so we can't just take the room over. Or it could be that they're not around. Maybe they've been on holiday. Maybe something's happened that we're not aware of. So what we have to do then, if there's no communication at all, we'll contact a guarantor at this point if they've got one. If they don't have a guarantor, we'll be contacting a next of kin just to ask them if everything's okay, to make sure that there isn't anything that we're not aware about from the tenant's welfare. If we still don't have any correspondence, now we're looking to probably be into, maybe 4 weeks, 5 weeks now of non-payment, then we're going to wait until the next rent day. And if they still haven't paid, then we're going to serve them a Section 8 notice for 2 months of rent arrears. And then we have to go through the possession hearing and take it to court if we have to go that far. Now, I'm happy to say we've only ever had to do that once in the last 10 years because of the communication lines that we use. We're always lenient with tenants. If they're struggling, we can come up with an agreement together to make sure that they don't have to struggle and they don't need to feel embarrassed. But the problem is when tenants cut that line of communication. So that's what we do. I'll give you an update on whether we get the rent in soon or not over the next few days, but I hope you find that useful. That's what we do. It's the most practical way that we feel that we can chase rents and make sure that we get paid without being too harassing to the tenant. So if you did find this useful, please click on that subscribe button. You know what to do, and I'll see you on the next video.